The Western genre was built on dusty roads, stoic gunslingers, and black and white morality, but hidden beneath the classics are films that challenged every frontier rule. These 20 overlooked masterpieces didn't just ride off into the sunset, they rewrote the map. Let's saddle up and explore the forgotten westerns that dared to question, twist, and redefine the genre forever. 1. The Shooting, 1966. In the heart of the Mojave Desert, The Shooting reimagines the Western as a cryptic fever dream. Directed by Monte Hellman and featuring Jack Nicholson before his breakout, this minimalist odyssey strips the genre down to silence, suspense, and sudden death. The plot is simple on the surface: a bounty hunter, a mysterious woman, and a trail that leads to nowhere, or maybe somewhere much darker. But it's not the plot that defines The Shooting, it's the tension. There's no sweeping score, no hero's triumph. Dialogue is spare, often unsettling. The landscape becomes a psychological maze where each footstep echoes with paranoia. Nicholson's character, with a gun and a grin, feels less like a cowboy and more like a slow-moving storm. What makes The Shooting a genre bender is how it dissolves the moral compass. There are no good guys, just cryptic choices and invisible consequences. You feel the dread more than the danger. And the final shot doesn't bring closure, only a haunting question mark. It bombed at the time. Audiences didn't understand it, but decades later, it's been rediscovered as one of the most daring anti-westerns ever filmed. A true cinematic ghost story, one that whispers more than it shouts. 2. Ride the High Country, 1962. Before Sam Peckinpah exploded onto the scene with the Wild Bunch, he crafted a quieter, more reflective farewell to the Old West with Ride the High Country. Randolph Scott and Joel McCrea. Joel McCrea, two aging icons of the cowboy era, play old lawmen escorting gold through hostile territory. But the real journey is internal. This isn't about gunfights or saloons. It's about pride, decay, and honor on the edge of extinction. Peckinpah uses the sweeping mountains not for grandeur, but to reflect isolation. The once mighty cowboys are now relics, respected by none, living by a code no longer relevant. One seeks redemption, the other betrayal. And as their morality fractures, so does the myth of the noble gunslinger. Ride the High Country quietly dismantles the romanticism of the frontier. There are moments of violence, yes, but they're never thrilling. They're sad, regretful. Peckinpah would later become synonymous with slow-motion violence, but here he's painting with restraint. It's melancholic, elegiac, and profound. When the final stand happens, it feels like the last heartbeat of a dying era. What went unnoticed at the time is now celebrated as one of the greatest westerns ever made, not for its action, but for its soul. It's the sound of the West riding into history's sunset. 3. Dead Man, 1995. Jim Jarmusch's Dead Man isn't just a western. It's a funeral dirge wrapped in surrealism. Shot in grainy black and white and scored by Neil Young's electric guitar improvisations, it stars Johnny Depp as William Blake, not the poet, but a doomed accountant who slowly transforms into a mythical outlaw. From the moment Blake arrives in a grimy frontier town called Machine, everything unravels. He's mistaken for someone else, shot, on the run, dying slowly, guided only by a Native American named Nobody, who believes Blake is the reincarnation of the poet warrior. Sounds strange? It is, and that's the point. Dead Man subverts the Western mythos entirely. There's no manifest destiny, no honor in violence. The frontier is hellish, capitalist, absurd. Everyone's lost, high, or morally bankrupt. Blake's journey isn't about redemption. It's about transformation, from innocent to outlaw, from man to myth, from life to death. Jarmusch uses silence and shadow like bullets. It's hypnotic, drifting like smoke. Critics were split when it debuted, confused by its dreamlike tone, but time has been kind. Today, Dead Man is seen as a psychedelic death poem to America's brutal past, a western that walks straight into the abyss and doesn't flinch. 4. Mabe Mrs Miller, 1971. Robert Altman's Mabe Mrs Miller redefines what a Western can feel like: cold, wet, and wrapped in melancholy. Set in a muddy Washington mining town, the film follows gambler John McCabe and brothel Madam Mrs Miller as they build an empire from dirt and desire. But this isn't a rise and fall tale. It's a slow dissolve into capitalism's icy grip. The town grows, power shifts, corporations arrive, and the lovers? They barely understand each other. The film isn't about love or heroism. It's about the quiet erosion of souls under snow and money. Leonard Cohen's mournful ballads echo like dirges across the mist. Altman's camera drifts through candlelit windows and sleet-covered streets. Gunfights are awkward, ugly. There are no one-liners. Just the clumsy, terrifying reality of violence. Critics didn't know what to make of it in 1971. It was too poetic, too anti-Hollywood. But decades later, it's hailed as a masterpiece, a genre-breaking monument to lost dreams and forgotten lives. This isn't the West of legends, it's the West of truth, and that truth is cold, lonely, and beautiful. 5. The Great Silence, 1968. Most Westerns bask in sun-drenched deserts. The Great Silence takes place in a blizzard. Directed by Sergio Corbucci, it's a spaghetti Western set in snow-covered Utah, where bounty hunters reign and justice is a cruel joke. Jean-Louis Trintignant plays Silence, a mute gunslinger with a haunting presence. He speaks only through his pistol, defending outlaws from the very people meant to protect them. Opposite him is Klaus Kinski, terrifying as the sadistic bounty killer Loco. Their duel isn't just of bullets, it's of ideologies. This film doesn't just subvert, it devastates. Good doesn't win, evil thrives. Silence never gets his revenge. And the ending? One of the most shocking, bleak finales in Western history. It left 1968 audiences stunned. Corbucci made it as a statement against violence, against false justice, and against Hollywood endings. It was banned in some countries for its nihilism, forgotten for decades, but now it's celebrated as a bold, icy masterpiece that tore the Western genre apart and left it bleeding in the snow. 6. The Proposition, 2005. The Outback isn't the Wild West. It's wilder, redder, and more ruthless. The Proposition, directed by John Hillcoat and penned by musician Nick Cave, takes place in the scorched hellscape of 1880s Australia. But don't be fooled by the setting. This is a Western at its moral core, and it's one of the most brutal ever filmed. The plot is a vicious bargain. British lawman Captain Stanley offers captured outlaw Charlie Burns a grim ultimatum: find and kill his older, sadistic brother Arthur, or his younger brother Mikey will be hanged. What follows is a psychological and physical descent into the abyss, where family loyalty collides with existential dread. Nick Cave's script reads like a cursed poem. Blood, guilt, and the echoes of colonial violence saturate every frame. The land itself seems angry. Flies buzz in the heat like specters. There's no civilization here, only decay dressed in Victorian uniforms. This is not a film about justice. It's about consequence, a haunting meditation on violence, colonialism, and fractured morality. Rarely has a Western captured such lyrical brutality, or looked so unflinchingly into the heart of darkness. 7th Meeks Cutoff, 2010. Most Westerns are about men leading the charge. Meeks Cutoff, directed by Kelly Reichardt, hands the reins to the women. And suddenly, the journey becomes something else entirely. Quiet, anxious, and radically uncertain. Set in 1845, the film follows a small group of settlers on the Oregon Trail, led by the overconfident and increasingly dubious Stephen Meek. But the narrative lens isn't Meek's. It belongs to Emily Tetherow, played with razor-sharp restraint by Michelle Williams. We see the world through her narrowed eyes, questioning authority, gauging danger, calculating survival. What makes this film so subversive is what it doesn't show. Gunfights are absent. Monument Valley is replaced by a flat, desolate expanse. The tension isn't in showdowns, it's in boiling water, cryptic stares, and the sound of wagon wheels in the wind. Dialogue is minimal. Silence speaks volumes. Reichardt strips the Western to its barest bones. and then rebuilds it as a slow-burning feminist survival story. By focusing on the psychological toll and powerlessness of women in the frontier, Meeks Cutoff transforms the genre from within. It redefines heroism not through conquest, but through skepticism and resilience. 8. Ulanas Raid, 1972. Few Westerns have dared to depict Native American conflict with the cold, clinical honesty of Ulanas Raid. Directed by Robert Aldrich and starring Burt Lancaster, this film digs deep into the psychological rot of frontier violence and comes out with blood on its hands. Lancaster plays a war-weary scout, guiding a young, idealistic lieutenant and a cavalry unit in pursuit of Ulzana, an Apache warrior who escapes reservation confinement and leaves a brutal trail behind. But this isn't a simple chase. It's a slow unraveling of innocence, cultural misunderstanding, and systemic cruelty. Unlike earlier Westerns, Ulanas Raid doesn't mythologize either side. Instead, it interrogates the violence. It asks, what does prolonged conflict do to the soul? How do you fight an enemy whose worldview you don't, or refuse to, understand? The film doesn't flinch. Rapes, mutilations, and military callousness are all depicted in unvarnished moral gray. Lancaster, stoic and broken, embodies the Western hero turned relic. His weariness is the film's compass, and the more the lieutenant clings to ideals, the more irrelevant he becomes. It's a brutal deconstruction of both frontier romanticism and American imperial logic. Rarely screened today, Ulanas Raid remains one of the most disturbing and truthful depictions of frontier warfare ever put to film. 9. The Salvation, 2014. The Western is often seen as a purely American tradition, but The Salvation proves that its archetypes can be powerfully reimagined across borders. Directed by Danish filmmaker Christian Levering and starring Mads Mikkelsen, this film injects the genre with Scandinavian fatalism and operatic vengeance. Mikkelsen plays John, a Danish settler in 1870s America, who witnesses the murder of his wife and child at the hands of a newly released outlaw. When he takes justice into his own hands, he triggers the wrath of the outlaw's brother, a sadistic gang leader backed by corrupt businessmen and a complicit town. What unfolds is a Shakespearean revenge tale, rich in visual poetry and moral ambiguity. Levering channels the ghost of Sergio Leone, but with colder eyes and tighter precision. Every frame is drenched in sepia grit. The silence before violence is deafening. The Salvation explores immigrant identity, corruption, and the price of revenge. It's not just about personal justice. It's about the slow erosion of idealism in a hostile, profit-driven land. And Mikkelsen, always a master of quiet suffering, delivers a performance that burns with restrained fury. Although it flew under the radar for many, The Salvation is a modern Western classic in disguise, proving the genre still has room for fresh blood and foreign sorrow. 10. The Ballad of Cable Hogue, 1970. What if the gunslinger story was retold as a dusty ballad about love, water, and the slow death of the Old West? That's The Ballad of Cable Hogue, Sam Peckinpah's most gentle and underrated film. And, ironically, it might be his most revolutionary. Jason Robards plays Cable Hogue, a luckless drifter left to die in the desert, who stumbles upon a spring and builds a stagecoach stop from nothing but grit and hope. There are no shootouts or revenge plots. Instead, the film celebrates resilience, self-reliance, and the awkward tenderness of human connection. Peckinpah, known for blood-soaked epics, surprises here with humor and lyricism. Yet beneath its charm is melancholy. The railroad is coming, the future is arriving. And Cable? He's a man caught between two eras, clinging to his oasis as modernity barrels toward him. The cinematography glows like an old photograph. The love story is fragile and fleeting. The ending, poetic and heartbreaking. Cable Hogue doesn't redefine the Western through violence, but through stillness, through patience, through waiting for water in the heat. Ignored at release, it's now seen as Peckinpah's secret masterpiece, a sun-bleached farewell to the era of lone men and wild frontiers. 11. Walker, 1987. If you thought westerns couldn't be punk rock, Walker is here to light that myth on fire. Directed by Alex Cox, of Repo Man and Sid and Nancy fame, this film is a political grenade disguised as a biopic, chronicling the real-life story of William Walker, an American mercenary who invaded Nicaragua in the 1850s and declared himself president. But Walker doesn't play by the rules of time or taste. Helicopters fly over horses, soldiers read Newsweek, Reagan-era headlines flash in Civil War settings. The anachronisms are intentional, because this isn't a history lesson. It's a savage indictment of American imperialism. Ed Harris plays Walker with chilling detachment, a man who believes in divine destiny no matter how many innocents must die. The violence is cartoonish, yet horrifying. The tone is absurd, yet deadly serious. And the message? Clear. The same playbook of conquest repeats, generation after generation. Audiences didn't know what to do with it in 1987. The studio dumped it, critics panned it. But now, Walker is hailed as a visionary act of political cinema. It isn't just a Western, it's a protest set to gunfire and gospel music. And it proves the genre can carry more than cowboys. It can carry revolution. 12. Tell Them Willie Boy Is Here, 1969. In a genre dominated by manifest destiny and rugged masculinity, Tell Them Willie Boy Is Here confronts one of America's most shameful foundations, racism, with unflinching clarity. Directed by Abraham Polanski and starring Robert Redford and Robert Blake, the film is based on the true 1909 manhunt of a Paiute man who kills in self-defense and is turned into a monstrous symbol by the press and lawmen. Robert Blake's Willie Boy is no villain. He's a product of betrayal, prejudice, and survival. Redford plays the sheriff caught in the middle, trying to uphold law, but slowly realizing he's enforcing something far more corrupt. As the chase tightens, so does the noose of historical injustice. The desert is vast, but the film feels claustrophobic. The score is mournful. The cinematography is stripped bare. And by the end, we're not watching justice. We're watching a myth being forged in blood. Released during a time of national protest, Willie Boy didn't fit the clean lines of 1960s Hollywood. It was too morally ambiguous, too politically loaded, but that's exactly why it matters. This Western doesn't celebrate the frontier. It exposes the cost of creating it. 13. The Long Riders, 1980. Outlaws have been romanticized since the silent era, but The Long Riders peels away the legend to show the fragile family underneath. Directed by Walter Hill, this film tells the story of the Jesse James gang, but with a twist. Real-life brothers play the real-life outlaw brothers. David, Keith, and Robert Carradine are the youngers. James and Stacy Keach are the James brothers. Dennis and Randy Quaid play the Millers. The casting alone makes the film feel intimate. A story about brotherhood, bound by blood and tragedy. Hill bathes the story in sepia tones and slow-motion violence, drawing comparisons to The Wild Bunch. But while the gunfights are expertly staged, it's the quiet moments that cut deepest. Shared looks, tired conversations, dreams unraveling. These aren't legends. They're men out of time, cornered by inevitability. When the gang rides into its final ambush, it feels less like a climax and more like an elegy. The Long Riders doesn't glorify the outlaw life. It mourns it. It recognizes the allure, but doesn't lie about the cost. And in doing so, it offers one of the most human portraits of the American outlaw ever committed to film. 14. Ombre, 1967. Paul Newman wasn't new to Westerns, but Hombre gave him one of his most quietly powerful roles. He plays John Russell, a white man, raised by Apaches, forced to navigate a society that rejects both his blood and his beliefs. When a stagecoach robbery traps him with a group of hostile passengers, Russell must decide whether to help the very people who see him as less than human. Directed by Martin Ritt and based on an Elmore Leonard novel, Ombre strips the Western down to pure moral tension. There are no towns to save, no badges to flash. Just a canyon, a gang of killers, and a group of desperate, prejudiced strangers relying on the man they fear. Newman plays Russell with icy restraint. He speaks little, but every word lands like a hammer. The real conflict isn't with the outlaws. It's with the passengers' hypocrisy, cowardice, and entitlement. When Russell finally makes his stand, it isn't heroic, it's necessary, and it costs him dearly. Ombre doesn't shout its message. It lets the silence speak, and in doing so, it redefined the Western hero not as a gunslinger, but as a man willing to die for people who'll never understand him. 15th Bone, Tomahawk, 2015. Sometimes the genre has to bleed to survive. Bone Tomahawk, directed by S. Craig Zahler, begins like a slow-burning Western and ends as something far more horrifying, a brutal descent into nightmare territory that you'll never forget. Kurt Russell plays Sheriff Hunt, a worn-down lawman leading a small rescue party into the desert to retrieve kidnapped townsfolk. But what waits beyond the hills isn't a band of criminals. It's a clan of cave-dwelling troglodytes, primitive and ferocious, who communicate through bone whistles and kill with prehistoric savagery. The horror elements are shocking, but Zahler never rushes. He builds the tension through long, atmospheric scenes and character development. You feel the dust, you hear the silence, and when the violence erupts, it's sudden, ghastly, and absolutely primal. What makes Bone Tomahawk so groundbreaking is how it dares to blend two genres with such commitment. This isn't horror disguised as a Western. It's a Western that evolves into horror, and in doing so, it pushes the boundaries of what frontier stories can hold. It's not for the faint of heart, but for those who can stomach it. Bone Tomahawk is a modern classic, a testament that the Western still has dark trails left to ride. 16. Ravenous, 1999. Set during the Mexican-American War, Ravenous is part Western, part black comedy, part cannibalistic fever dream. Directed by Antonia Bird, this overlooked cult gem drops the Western frontier into a swirling cauldron of moral rot, human hunger, and existential dread. Guy Pearce stars as Captain John Boyd, a cowardly soldier reassigned to a remote Sierra Nevada outpost after surviving a battle through deception. There, a starving stranger stumbles in with a harrowing tale of cannibalism and sets off a chain of horror that spirals into myth. The film draws from the Native American legend of the Wendigo, a spirit of insatiable hunger. But Ravenous isn't just about flesh. It's about manifest destiny, colonialism, and how the hunger for power corrupts the soul. Carlyle is magnetic as a man who finds strength through devouring others. Literally and metaphorically, the tone swings wildly, chilling one moment, darkly funny the next, underscored by a hauntingly weird score from Michael Nyman and Damon Albarn. Ravenous flopped at the box office, misunderstood by audiences and mangled by studio interference. But it's since become a cult masterpiece, a rare Western that trades gun duels for gut-wrenching metaphors. This isn't the West of honor and grit. It's the West of appetite, grotesque, surreal, and deeply human. 17. The Claim, 2000. Michael Winterbottom's. The Claim reimagines the mayor of Casterbridge as a snowbound Western set during the gold rush. It's a hauntingly beautiful tale of ambition, guilt, and the ghosts we bury beneath prosperity. And it unfolds like a long, slow ache through the frozen mountains. Peter Mullen plays Daniel Dillon, a self-made town king who has built a thriving frontier community, Kingdom Come, out of cold wilderness. But when a railroad surveyor arrives, along with Dillon's long-lost wife and daughter, the empire begins to crumble. This is a Western of ice, not fire. Emotions are buried under layers of snow, power, and pride. The cinematography is breathtaking. All golden lanterns, misty ridgelines, and creaking wooden walls. But underneath the beauty is rot. Dillon's wealth was born from a terrible betrayal, and fate has come calling. The Claim doesn't follow the typical arc of justice or redemption. It's a Greek tragedy disguised as a frontier epic. The violence is sparse, the heartbreak constant. Sarah Polley and Mila Jovovich provide emotional grounding as the women caught in the unraveling past. Neglected upon release, the film now stands as one of the most poetic, emotionally rich Westerns of the 21st century. A slow, sad requiem for the cost of civilization Bad Company is a coming-of-age story set in the shadow of the Civil War. But this isn't a patriotic journey or a gunslinging thrill ride. It's a dusty, unflinching look at innocence lost on the raw edge of the American frontier. Barry Brown stars as Drew Dixon, a boy who flees the Union draft and falls in with a ragtag group of teenage outlaws led by Jake Rumsey. What begins as mischief and camaraderie slowly degrades into desperation, betrayal, and moral collapse. The genius of Bad Company lies in its tone. There's no grand adventure, only hunger, cruelty, and the slow erosion of childish ideals. Benton paints the West not as a land of opportunity, but as a cold wilderness where survival trumps ethics and death comes with no warning. The performances are understated, the violence is sudden and ugly, and the cinematography feels like a faded photograph. There's even a bitter touch of satire, mocking the glorified outlaw myth with a brutal realism rarely seen in westerns. Ignored during its release, Bad Company has since been reclaimed as a vital entry in the revisionist Western canon. It's not about legends, it's about the boys who never made it that far. 19. Blueberry, 2004. Rarely has a Western dared to go as far off the map as Blueberry, a French psychedelic frontier film unlike anything else in the genre. Directed by Jan Koenen and inspired loosely by a comic book, this film blends mysticism, mind-bending visuals, and Native American spirituality into a kaleidoscopic vision of the West. Vincent Cassel stars as Mike Blueberry, a lawman haunted by trauma and drawn into a metaphysical showdown in the desert. But don't expect a linear story. The plot dissolves into a swirling trip of shamanic visions, inner demons, and cosmic reckonings. Think El Topo meets Apocalypse Now on peyote. The visuals are stunning, at times abstract, surreal, and overwhelming. You're not just watching the West, you're experiencing its spiritual underbelly. Juliette Lewis, Michael Madsen, and Ernest Borgnine round out the eclectic cast, adding grit to the film's more celestial ambitions. Blueberry is a divisive film. Critics slammed it for incoherence. But over time, it's been recognized as a bold experiment. A rare Western that tries not to show us the land, but the soul of the land. It asks not who will survive, but what they'll become on the journey. 20. The Homesman, 2014. Directed by and starring Tommy Lee Jones, The Homesman is one of the bleakest, most emotionally complex westerns ever made. It opens on wide plains and ends in silence, not with gunfire, but with deep, lingering sorrow. Hilary Swank plays Mary B. Cuddy, a frontier woman tasked with transporting 3 mentally ill women across brutal terrain to safety. She recruits George Briggs, a drifter and claim jumper, to assist her. Together, they embark on a journey that exposes not only the cruelty of the land, but the invisible wounds inflicted by isolation, hardship, and loss. Swank delivers a searing performance, stern, lonely, and tragically human. The film doesn't glorify the West. It shatters it. Women are not symbols of purity here. They are survivors of unspeakable trauma. And Cuddy, desperate for connection, carries burdens no one else sees. The Homesman upends every Western trope. There is no triumph, no catharsis, only consequence. The film quietly indicts the myth of frontier strength by showing us the emotional wreckage it leaves behind. Overlooked by mainstream audiences, The Homesman stands today as one of the most heartbreaking and mature Westerns in recent memory, a grim epilogue to the legends we've been sold for over a century. The West was never simple. And these 20 films proved it. They tore down myths, reshaped heroes, and revealed forgotten truths. If this ride moved you, share it, subscribe, and let the dust settle. There's always another trail to follow, and another story waiting in the silence of the frontier.